Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. And this week we're going to be making a new stand and storage for my thicknesser planer. Roll the intro. So I was very fortunate to have a friend deliver a kitchen that they had stripped out. I'd had an idea about changing the base of the thickness of planer for a while, because if you've seen the video, it was all screwed together and it does constantly wobble. So I wanted to do something a bit more permanent. And when I saw all the bits and bobs from the kitchen, it gave me a great idea of building a stand. So after scratching my head and getting an idea in my mind, I started out by getting one of the units and cutting it down. Now this is actually a drawer unit. You'll see the drawers are on the other side, but I wanted to cut off all of the irregular shaped edges. Obviously this has been against a wall and it's had pipe. It looks like pipes go through it, drainage pipes. So it's very uneven on the side, and I wanted to get a nice level plane in order to back it with another cabinet. So the first thing I did was mark it. I marked in 2.5 centimeters from the edge of the cabinet, and that gave me just enough space that I was able to cut the edge off and have a flat surface on both sides. So I got out my plunge saw. Again, really impressed. I know I mention this every time I use it in a video, but very impressed with this Parkside plunge saw. It does really fantastically clean cuts. So when I did the first side, I then flipped the unit over and I did the second. So this second unit was in better condition and less damaged on the end, so it was easier to do, just trim the two edges off and get it level exactly how I wanted it. I have to say, structurally, these units are in really good condition when you consider they've just been stripped out of somebody's house. The only thing I would say is they were incredibly filthy, really dirty, greasy, stains all over them, so they did require quite a bit of cleaning. But I trimmed them up first to make sure they were exactly the right size, and then I just put them up to each other back to back so I could see, or side to side I should say, to see how they would work together. A little bit of speed cleaning, as you can see there. Oh, how I wish it was like that in real life. It took a few squirts to get all the grease and grime off, but when I'd done that, I was pleased with how they looked. So the next stage was to put the two cabinets together and see how they married up, and I was really pleased. They were an exact fit on both sides. I mean, I know I'd measured it and I expected it to be like that, but I was very pleased with how they looked. Really good together, and it then gave me the opportunity to start working on the base and then fixing the two together much more permanently. So I want to be really careful with the measurements for the top of the unit. Well, it's actually not the top of the unit. Technically speaking, it's the bottom, but I did take my time measuring it because I wanted to get it exactly spot on, because I wanted the two base units to sit on this piece of wood. So it had to be exactly the right size. So when I'd measured it and I was happy with how it looked, I was then able to get the plunge saw out again and then take care of the sides and the back just to make sure it was exactly the correct size. So the next step was to remove these plastic feet, sort of spacer feet. I have to say this was a much more difficult task than I anticipated. This set seemed to come off okay. The set on the bigger cabinet just really didn't. I mean, in the end I got the hammer out, the chisel out, I threw the kitchen sink at them. Really, they just could not get them off, and they weren't even screwed in, these ones. It was just the plastic sort of infill plug that went into the wood that would kept them there. I just couldn't get enough purchase on it to get them out. I am going to keep these. I'm sure somewhere along the line they'll come in handy for a project in the future, but I had to get them all off, and eventually, after a lot of struggling, as you can see, I managed to get them off. I think it's always a difficult balance when you're doing projects like this, because obviously I'm retaining a huge amount of the original worktops and benches and cabinets. I'm not actually doing a lot to them, so I wanted to be careful and make sure that, you know, I was able to get them off cleanly, which thankfully I eventually managed to do. And this was the first time that I put the two of them properly together with the legs and everything off, and as you can see, a really good fit. I just clamped them up to make sure they were perfectly in line. As I said, the wood on some of the edges of these cabinets isn't great, to be honest. Some of it's been a little bit sort of damaged over the years, but this is not an aesthetically beautiful piece. We're just talking about something very functional that very few people are going to see. So it's just had to be right, and it had to be strong. So then I did some pre-drilled some holes, and I countersunk the screws, and I just went around the edge and joined the bottom, as it is now. It looks like the top in here, but the bottom of it I joined to the two cabinets, ready for the piece of worktop I was going to use for the top. I'm experimenting with a few different camera angles, so excuse the wobbly shake, but this is a camera that I put inside the unit so you could see me fixing it. I just included it, I liked it, so I thought I'd put this camera angle in. So with the two cabinets joined together, the next thing I did was lay them out, and I got a piece of the spare worktop that had come out of the kitchen refurbishment, and I just laid it on top. And initially I laid it on top to make sure that it actually fitted, which it did. It had quite a bit of space either end, and I wanted this to almost sort of to go flush to either end. I did in the end eventually decide on giving a couple of mil spare, but I wanted to get it as close as possible. I took the metal edging strip off of this one side. There wasn't one well, there was one on the other side, but I knew it was going to cut. I was going to cut it off, but this one was the one that I wanted to keep that edge going. So I took the metal strip off, and then I just spent a few minutes getting it exactly as I wanted it in preparation for cutting it with the plunge saw. And again, another shout out. I know I keep going on about it, but this Parkside plunge saw is so worth the money. £69 it was, and it does fantastic cuts. It does cuts equivalent to a much more expensive machine. And actually this video is being made at the end of August in 2021, and if you're watching it live, as it were, you can still pick these up. And a lot of Lidls have still got them when they haven't sold them from the middle of Lidls, but can't recommend it highly enough. So when I've done the two sides, I then did the back of the unit. I extended the plunge saw track, and I cut along the back. I have to say the back of this unit, which was the bit that went against the wall, was quite ropey, and it had lots of sealant on it, so I wanted to make sure I took that off, which I did, and it wasn't perfectly square, but it was good enough for me. I then went for my yet again box of unused screws from the chicken coop and fixed it to the top. And on the inside, you can see I just put some metal brackets. Again, this is another new camera angle for me, but I just put a few metal brackets in it because I wasn't worried about the top lifting off because it's going to have a lot of weight on it permanently. And it was more just keeping it together, but I also wanted something that wasn't going to interfere with the drawers. So that's why I decided on those brackets, which fitted really well. So this was the set of sort of lever wheels, I don't know what you call them officially, that I got off Amazon. I'll put a link to them in description. Fantastic these were, absolutely brilliant. They came with a really good template, which you just laid where you wanted it. It told you to take it 1.5 inches off the bottom of the floor. I just put them in, put the actual things together. It was just 2 bolts you can see there, and then screwed them down exactly where they were. Now I have to say, big disclaimer here, all the way through installation of these I kept thinking to myself, there is no way these things are going to be strong enough to lift this unit, and I just thought they'll pull straight out of the cabinet or the wheels will go on the wonk. I just thought there's no way that these were going to work, and I'm pleased to say that I was definitely wrong about that. They are fantastic. Never used this product before. I don't know if any of you watching this video, if anyone is watching this video, have used a system like this before, but I can't recommend it highly enough. I just thought they were absolutely fantastic. So when I'd secured them all, I then attached the wheels. So when I'd attached the wheels, it was time for the moment of truth. And I pushed one side down, as you can see, it lifted up. It's meant to give it a clearance of about 1.5 inches, but worked a treat. Very happy. The next stage was to put the drawers in and just make sure that they still fitted and everything went okay. And as you can see, they slotted in nicely, and it's now actually starting to take shape of the unit it's going to become. So as you can see so far, everything has gone to plan. The wheels are working okay. I did lose a tiny little bit of the lamination on the top here, which is a bit of a shame when I was turning it over, but this is an old kitchen that's been gutted, so I'm not too worried about that, if I'm being 100% honest. Yes, I would have liked to have kept it, but it's not the end of the world. So a couple of things. This part here is quite rough, and you can see here, this is where I cut the edge with the plunge saw. It's just taken off some of the lamination just where I caught the edge. Now weirdly enough, it's only taken the lamination off. It hasn't scored or grooved or cut the wood in any way, and it's done the same on that side. So that shows you it was a good cut at least, but I really don't like the look of this. It looks very untidy, so I've got 2 options. The other option that's in my mind is this board, excuse me, this board is actually not as sturdy as it looks, and I wanted to use this to potentially put clamps on or put other things on, and I'm not going to be able to use it like that without some sort of reinforcement. Now with all of these units that I got quite a lot of individual shelves, so what I'm actually going to do is put some pocket holes in there, and I think I'm going to pocket hole them in here. I might completely infill this with a piece of wood. I've got a piece of wood, let me show you what I mean. So I've got lots of pieces like this of different sizes, and the idea is to pocket hole them in internally to get them to lay flush. Now they do just about lay flush. There's a screw that's coming through at the bottom there, which is stopping that from going flush, but I can just take that off. So if I lay these flush inside, it will give me a better sort of surface to work with, and it will look neater. So what I might be tempted to do, I'm not going to cover the whole thing. I think what I'm going to do is put a couple of slats in that are exactly that width, maybe go for 2 of these, and then put a thin layer of board, either hardboard or I've got some thin MDF, just completely cover it on the top. So if I do want to screw things or attach things, I know that I haven't got a void and I'm going straight into the board that's secured underneath. So that's the next thing that I'm going to do. Just one shout out for these legs. I'll put a link in the description. When I fitted these, I didn't think there was a hope in hell's chance that they would fit. When I was attaching them, I thought, well, these aren't going to work, but they do. They're absolutely fab. I think they were about £40 for the set, which is probably quite a lot of money, but this unit is really heavy. I can barely lift it on my own, which is going to be good when I'm using it on my thickness of planer, but these lift it no problem. Each one of these, it says on the box, I think, has a capacity of £220 for each one, so easily man enough to do the job. I've chosen not to put anything on the bottom of this. You might have noticed I haven't put any feet or anything like that, because I think anything else will just slide, and there is so much weight on this box. I'll be very, very surprised if it moves anywhere. But so far, so good. As you'll see, I've just put the drawers back in. I was going to change the drawers and replace them, but all of the openers are all Bloom openers and closers, and they are absolutely top quality. So I'm not going to do anything with those, and actually those drawers are pretty handy. I'm going to use them as they are. So next stage is to board this all off, get it nice and level to make it look nicer, and also to make it more functioning. Let's do that now. So then I measured to get 2 pieces of wood to go in, which I took over to the miter saw. They were just 2 shelves from some of the other units, the other cabinets. When I did that, it was time for a pocket hole. I do love a pocket hole. You probably noticed if you've seen any of the other videos, this is the pocket hole channel. So I put some pocket holes in the sort of infill panels, and then I offered them up, and they were actually perfectly sized, which for me is quite a miracle, because I always tend to do something too small, too big. But I offered them up, they fitted absolutely perfectly, and I screwed them in using the pocket holes. I was very careful here because I didn't want to go through the unit or through the side. And actually that one there, the bottom left one, you can see just slightly pierced the outside of the unit, but I just pulled it back one step and it was fine. The next stage was to cut a piece of board to cover that. I used a piece of board that I've used in many of my videos that I got from B&Q. It was an offcut. It was for the top of the worktops. They put it on the top in the packaging. So I cut it up to the exact size. Again, went back to the plunge saw and got a really nice, good clean cut on that. And then I offered it up and it was the correct size. Now here I made a mistake. The first time I did this, and I didn't include this in the footage, I used my air gun, my air nailer, and the wood just pulled straight off. For some reason it just didn't hold, the staples didn't hold. So then I went back to my pre-drilling and countersinking and put some screws in to keep it nice and tight, because there are going to be things on this, so I wanted to make sure it was really, really well secured, because I'm going to attach other things to it later on. Okay, the next stage was to put the planer on and get it centered, which I did there. I have to be honest, I really did struggle with this part. I didn't include it all, but actually getting these, the connectors and the bolts to come up and go through the feet took quite a long time. I didn't include it all, otherwise this video would have been 10 hours. I really took my time drilling these holes. I wanted to get them dead straight. I used an 8mm there, M8 bolts that I put through, so I used an 8mm drill bit, and as you can see, no problem went through. I'd marked it all up properly, but I really wanted to get them spot on. Then I fed the bolt through just to make sure it worked, and luckily for me it did. I then put on the washers and screws and I was ready to lay the machine on. This actually was a lot more fiddly than it looks. I had to wedge a spanner on the top, obviously the top of the bolt, and then thread underneath with a ratchet. It took quite a while, as I said, to get them all on, but they're nice and tight and they're not going anywhere at all. So when I managed to get it done, to be honest, I was actually quite relieved, but I was also pleased to move on to the final stage. So this was the final stage, and all I wanted to do was essentially make a sort of, well, pocket, I think is probably the best way to describe it, that I could put my tracks, my plunge saw tracks in. So I basically just got a piece of CLS timber, normal size timber. I ran it through my table saw. When it went through my table saw, I wanted to make it half the thickness that it was before, and I used those as a sort of outer frame really, and I screwed those directly on to the back of the unit, which you'll see in a minute. Obviously I pre-drilled and I countersunk them. Actually had a little bit of a disaster when I screwed it on. A piece of the wood split at the top, but to be honest, it's not a big deal, and it's certainly not worth taking it all off and going back and sorting it out for the fact I've got a split piece of wood. As I said, no one's going to see this anyway, so it's not a big deal. But I was just pleased that everything was nice and straight and it was exactly as it should be. So here I am pre-drilling and putting in the countersink holes. As you can see, I've got two sort of sides and a bottom. One of them was slightly bowed, but it wasn't an issue. And the final stage was just to offer it up and screw them in, which I did. I decided to use my air nailer. I gave it a second chance on this, and actually, to be fair, it worked a lot better and it really held them together. This bit was a little bit tricky, trying to get everything exactly level, but it turned out really well in the end. And this is the finished article. It turned out exactly as I wanted it to, exactly as I had in my mind. The drawers all down the right hand side work really, really well. Very pleased with those. And obviously the bit on the left hand side, I know it's potentially a little bit ugly, but I'm not going to worry about that. So that slot fits perfectly. I can fit my two tracks that go in my plunge saw in there absolutely perfectly. So a fairly quick project, a fairly short video for me, which must be nice for a change. A huge thank you for watching. I've got a couple of interesting projects coming up over the next 4 or 5 weeks. So if you're not subscribed, please make sure you do that. Don't forget to like and leave me a comment if you want to give me any feedback, and hit the notification bell. I hope you all have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.